A couple of years ago, MTV had a campaign of Vote or Die during the election season. And, I don't think that they were benevolent in perpetuating a concept of let's all express the freedoms that our forefathers fought so hard to give us. I think what they were doing was understanding that their audience tended to slant towards a particular political party, and if they could socially pressure that audience to vote, they might be able to sway the election in that party's favor. Today, I don't know if that's exactly what's happening, but you do see everywhere, everybody and every service such as Facebook and Reddit promoting let's all get out there, let's register, let's vote. And that is a good thing in general and in theory, but let me ask you, are you an informed voter? If you have only spent the last few months or maybe even years consuming news of one side, or a combination of maybe one side and neutral sources, are you really going to be responsible in voting for that side if you haven't taken the time to research and look into the other side? Is that really being a responsible citizen? Now, classically, in the original Greek democracy and in the original democratic republic we had in the United States, to vote, you had to be a landowner. In the Greek society, and in America, you had to basically be wealthy enough to pay the poll tax. So that is not what we want to go back to, obviously, because our society has only banks as landowners, and we want to represent the needs and desires of the poor as well. But the point is that originally only the aristocracy was able to have the time to think about politics, to innovate. That's why you had people like, only did, the plays come from William Shakespeare, a noble. Only did, the concept and theory of physics come from Isaac Newton. The nobles, not from the everyday man, generally speaking, because the everyday man never had time. He was busy scrounging and trying to make a survival for himself. So today, we live in a society in an age of luxury, and people do have time, but there are many distractions, and for the most part, people are getting into their own echo chambers and not really thinking about the other side. So, and a lot of people get very passionate about a single issue, but I'm going to tell you right now, this election is not about abortion as much as it is about something else. Abortion is a very important issue, especially if you're a conservative, but it's not the number one issue. Is it equality? Is it equality for racial justice and for economics? Is that the number one issue? If you're a Democrat, that is an important issue, but it is not the number one issue. Actually, all three of those issues are obviously very important for everybody. But what is the number one issue in our country, in the United States right now? It is unity. Unity is the number one issue. We cannot get anything done if we don't have unity, and we threaten ourselves with the future of basically losing our competitiveness in the world, and in a very bleak future, basically the country no longer even existing. So what good are all the battles that you fought for your particular issue if some other country or some breakup or civil war of this country results in us not even having anything related or associated to the foundations of this country anymore, if it becomes something completely alien? Now, I'm not saying that that's likely. I don't think that is likely, but it is good to think in the extremes, because the degree is a fact. The degree is a reality, and there is a very real degree of disunity and what I would call an epidemic of antisocial behavior in the United States and now to some degree in the world, especially because of this pandemic. And it's very concerning. Now, the pandemic has kind of exacerbated some things, but we already had some things in place, and I would argue that the main issues are coming from the big tech companies from the United States, and they're affecting the entire planet, unfortunately, these monopolies of information. And so when I talked about the cost-benefit analysis of voting, if you are an informed voter and you have looked at all the sides, at least to a responsible degree, then yes, please vote. But there are actually greater things that you can do. Instead of spending 2 years to gain a single vote, what if you spent 2 days to transition away from Google search to DuckDuckGo, from Google browser to Firefox, from Facebook to Discord, or a plethora of other private platforms? The challenge is, in the United States, we've had an essential duopoly since the foundation of the country, but has it ever really been this much of an issue? I don't think so. The reason why it's an issue now is because of basically a combination of echo chambers, of these platforms encouraging echo chambers, and a tyranny of majority of public opinion, and the swaying of public opinion, the manufacturing of consent by the big powers, by the big media companies, by the big social network companies, and even by Google as a search engine. And by the way, I didn't mention that list. If spend 2 days transitioning away from Fox News and CNN and any of the other big media companies to something independent, but not just one news source, but many, instead of spending time in passive consumption of information, go out there and actively search out the truth. Instead of consuming whatever they put in front of you, especially if you know that they're going to reward your biases, take time to research individual issues. Get curious. Search for the term immigration in, even in Google search and YouTube, but ideally in an alternative search engine. Do some active research and look at multiple sources. Now, that's the problem with Google, is that they're now funneling a slight slant towards mainly the tyranny of the majority. That's the problem, is when in a site like Reddit, the most popular posts rise to the top, regardless of whether they're, of any value to society or not. And Google is actually doing somewhat the same thing. It's not necessarily the editorials that are providing the greatest quality, the greatest depth of research, the greatest open-minded perspective, or moderate or independent, or perspective that tries to focus on unifying the country over the most important issues and bringing each other together. Instead of those kinds of results, it tends to promote the results that are the most popular. And why is a result popular? Usually because it's very controversially communicated, or because it is inflammatory, or because it was the most quickly shared version of the story instead of the most detailed version of the story. And so everybody's blaming Facebook for swaying elections and for creating toxic culture and echo chambers, and that's very, very real, and it's a very serious problem with Facebook. But actually Google is doing the same thing, but under the guise of authenticity, of results, of more professionalism, of more unbiased, or just trustworthy results. But it's really in Google, it's in Facebook, and now we have tech monopolies, and our government, the US government, is not doing anything to apply the antitrust laws of the 1920s, that applied to, or 30s, that applied to big oil. They're not doing anything to apply those laws to these big tech companies, or to some degree there might need some new laws or some reinterpretation of the laws, because it's not just an economic monopoly, it's a monopoly of information, and of control of information, and of control of our data. We do not have that privacy anymore. It's a serious issue, and it is threatening our freedoms. And interestingly enough, these companies are all based in the United States, but it's not just the United States that is affected. we are seeing a diffusion of antisocial behavior in the whole world, and of polarizing behavior, and of toxic behavior. You know, on Facebook, we project ourselves to an audience that we no longer even have sight of. We've lost sight of the audience we're speaking to, and we just vomit our views. And to some degree, we do it because we're insecure and we care. We want people to care about us and what we think. But on another side, we don't care at all what people say or how they'll respond. And that is the very definition of apathetic and antisocial behavior. What if we spent time cultivating communities of authenticity? Sometimes those communities might have to be a little bit smaller. They might have to be a little less viral. They might have to be a little bit more categorical. And that is why we have this new wave of social media and tools like Discord, Microsoft Teams, and Slack, which there is a threat of them becoming like Facebook at some point. But for now, basically, you have full control over your privacy, and it is a tendency to categorize the groups and the conversations. So you have to kind of create a group around a concept, maybe, you know, high school buddies, family, or learning languages, or board games, you know, and then you build a community from that. So I am moving all of my activity from Facebook over to Discord. I am moving all of my searching from Google to DuckDuckGo. I'm moving all of my browsing behavior from Google Chrome to Firefox. And I have already, for many years, moved away from Fox News, CNN, and all of the major organizations, and I've been doing active research on the issues that I care about. But honestly, you know, the best thing you can do is not to be involved politically, and not even to vote, but to get crazy with your family and with your friends. Do something that is not judgmental, but, you know, throw some confetti, dance with your friends, you know, have deep and meaningful discussions with your family, serve them, you know, spend time with one another, get to know one another, and kind of get away from this toxic antisocial behavior that these networks are encouraging us towards. It's a disease that we're being funneled and herded towards. Get away from that. Take control of your life. Take control of your privacy. Take control of the conversations you're having. Take control of the environment, the digitally social environments in which you reside and spend your time. Take control of those things. That is the number one thing that you can do right now and at any time. And it takes far less time to become an informed voter, and the impact will be far greater. So once again, vote if you're informed. If you're not, express your freedom to not vote or become informed. And let's vote with our behaviors. Let's vote with the companies that we support and that we engage in and that we use as tools. Thanks for listening. This is going to be probably one of my last videos on Facebook. So I hope to see you on Discord. And I will be posting links to that. But otherwise, in a worst case scenario, you can always get a hold of me via text. Catch you later.